So we're going to continue on because the chapter barely is 2, 3 more paragraphs, so we're going to see what happens. Charles' eyes flash at Nick's, and Nick's eyes flash at Charles. They're like dogs circling each other before a fight. And look who's slap dab in the middle. Me. Isn't Miss Garrett going to do anything? Normally, she would have headed for the light switch by now. But I guess she's like me, paralyzed. Then I hear a spider. Take it easy, y'all. Let's just be cool. You dig? For once, he's not joking or being a goof. After a few more seconds of flashing eyes, the boys drop back to their own desks. Phew, and you never saw Miss Garrett looking so grateful. After this, Spider's got himself an A+ in social studies. I bet you anything. Let's return to the lesson, please. Miss Garrett's voice shakes a little. And I don't wonder. What's a majority? She writes a percentage sign on the board. And what happens if no candidate receives at least 51% of the vote? Hands go up. A runoff. She explains that if there is a runoff, it will happen 4 weeks from now, on June 2nd, but I can barely hear what she's saying. My eyeballs stay on high alert for the least movement between Charles and Nick. Maybe fur didn't fly this time, but guess who's getting caught up in the tussle if they go fist cuffs for real? Me, the girl in the middle. Boom. It's wild, isn't it? And there it is. Thus the title, My Year in the Middle. So let's just break down these last couple paragraphs of this chapter, because they cover a lot of ground in 2 pages. Like 2.5 pages, sorry. So let's just go back to the top. So I love, first of all, the reference to the lights. That whole thing, the teacher, okay, so if the kids started, suddenly they're all, and it gets loud, from 0 to 60 in 5 seconds, right? They'd go to the little switch. It used to be this little pointy switch, and they go on off, because that would disrupt the kids enough to be and stop what they're doing. So I love that reference because that was a good one. But all jokes aside, I think that it's interesting that, like her, Lou, she's talking about how the teacher must be like her, paralyzed. And in the actual typing or the print, it has this pause, the dash, before paralyzed. So the author is wanting you to pay attention to this point. And it almost emphasizes the paralyzed, like pausing, paralyzed. Maybe I'm just reaching. But again, we're getting that kind of middleman experience where, again, she feels kind of like an outsider to American society, but yet here she is, literally, physically, about to be caught in the crossfire between this battle. And I think there is maybe some obvious conclusions one can draw from this imagery is that there are a lot of groups of people in American society that get caught in the crossfire when 2 groups go at it. So then there's the character of Spider, which he's a very interesting character. I don't actually remember if we went over that in the first video, but he is also a person of color, but he was the radio talk show host guy. He likes to play all kinds of types of music and stuff, and he's very positive, inspirational. And he's the one that they all kind of respect. Skin color aside, because he's take it easy, y'all, and they both okay, right? So he's kind of has that leadership role, and he respected beyond any labels that happen outside of the classroom. Within the classroom and within that community, he has some level of rapport with his peers. And so that's when you're thinking about subcultures that appear in school and then how that manifests in adult society, this is a particularly interesting exchange where the author is drawing attention to Look at what's happening. There are people arguing. This is going to be a thing, right? White versus blacks. And there's going to be people around who are paralyzed and they don't know what to do when people should be taking action, positive action, right? As opposed to arguing and fighting, negative action, hurting each other. And then she says, this is what you do in response. She's kind of like doing a call and response. At least that's how I interpret it. But there's this call and response here where, no, you need to be a leader. You need to set an example. Like, no, that's not what we do here. In society, we act like adults, or we act respectful, or we act, humble, or whatever it is, like those types of traits where we are taking other people into account around us and trying to be open to other people's perspectives, yada, etc., etc. This is a good example of how to do that in this situation, especially where, again, the teacher is supposed to have authority in this room. And unfortunately, when these kinds of conversations occurred, there was a tendency to kind of gloss over it. She does, however, to her credit, I'm trying to be a teacher too, so I'm not trying to give teachers flack right now. But she does, to her credit, she says, Nick, hush, right? So she addresses the behavior shortly and briefly before it just, boom, escalates. So there was a directive there. And she also gives a positive reinforcement. We're getting to my academia terminology now. She gives the positive reinforcement when Charles compliments Belinda, give her an A+. She shakes her head and she smiles. She doesn't, tell him to, sit down, you little poop head. Like, she doesn't do that. So she was doing the best she could in that situation. That's what I believe. So, and I think that that's reflected when, again, now continuing down, where we see she's like, let's return to the lesson, please. And her voice shakes a little. It says that in the book. And she's like, and I don't wonder, like, as to say, as I'm not surprised. Like, that was some intense stuff that goes on. If anybody has witnessed a fight or been in a fight, yeah. So then we go on to the whatchamacallit, the election terminology, where we're talking about primary elections and runoffs and things. And it's amazing how she created such a great political sandwich in this chapter. Like, I love it. So that's kind of my review on that chapter. Again, I love this book, so please read it. And I will probably be moving on to another book because there are plenty of other narratives or personal stories that need to be